The night Tupac Shakur walked into Quad Studios, he expected to record music. Instead, he left shot 5 times and convinced someone had set him up. It was supposed to be a simple stop at a Manhattan studio, but within minutes, he was met with gunfire in the lobby, and one of the biggest artists in hip-hop's life was in danger. For years, people have argued about what really happened that night. Was it a robbery or a hit on his life? Because, according to Tupac, people close to him most likely knew it was going to happen. It's November 30th, 1994. Tupac is in recovery from 5 gunshots, confused, angry, and feeling betrayed. The Quad Studio shooting is one of the most infamous moments in hip-hop history, and it changed the genre forever. If you want to know the full timeline of what happened, watch this Quad Studio story first. And going forward, we will assume you've watched it, because now we're just focusing on this like a case, figuring out who was most likely involved, separating the facts from the fiction. And keep in mind, this is still officially unsolved, so everything here is alleged and based on publicly available interviews, reporting, and statements. And we're not here to falsely accuse anyone, but we are here to list all the facts out to see who most likely played a role. Let's start with the name that always sits at the top of the board, Jimmy Henchman. Jimmy booked the studio session at Quad. He was in communication with Tupac, and in a situation like this, the first question is simple. Who could even locate Tupac that night at the time to make an ambush even possible? There are accounts placing Jimmy at Quad's that night, and we have this footage showing him leaving the scene after the shooting. Then you add the long-running claims, publicly repeated for years, that Jimmy was the ringleader. Some of those claims came from major platforms and journalists, and yes, some of it turned into legal back and forth, with Jimmy claiming his innocence, saying he wasn't involved. So we won't treat any single allegation as facts. What we will look into is whether there is any truth to the rumors. To start, Tupac himself believed certain people around him weren't clean. He references Jimmy Henchman in his song Against All Odds, promising him payback, and even in his Vibe interview right after the shooting. Also, multiple people, including Napoleon from the Outlaws, have claimed they were present when Jimmy sent messages to Tupac through his friend, Big Stretch, messages that sound less like peace and more like street talk. While Tupac was hiding out of healing, Stretch allegedly visited him with a message from Jimmy saying not to go to war unless your money is right, which prompted Tupac to reply back at the end of his song, Against All Odds, telling Jimmy he's ready for war. Tupac also said he received a message from Jimmy saying it was supposed to be a robbery until he reached for his gun. Besides this, there were also several platforms in the past that claimed Jimmy allegedly made a confession of setting up Tupac, but the paperwork has been sealed. Now, I'm not telling you that proves Jimmy ordered anything. These are the facts, and until the case is solved, we can only assume, but let me know what you think. Now let's move to the next name just mentioned that never leaves this story, Haitian Jack. If we're talking motive, Jack had one of the clearest. Their relationship blew up publicly. Pac was dissing him in the media, calling him out, embarrassing his name. And streetwise and reputation-wise, that matters. But Jack had always denied being involved in the shooting. He also admits something that's hard to ignore. Right after Pac got shot, he says he received a call from the people who did it. A heads up, more of a favor. He claims he didn't give the order, that they acted on their own. But think about what that means. Whoever did it believed Jack would appreciate it, and they felt comfortable calling him immediately after. Now, Jack wasn't even in New York that night of the shooting, so physically being there is not the point. The point is the atmosphere he was connected to, and the way that fallout can create open season energy around somebody. But one thing we can't ignore is in an interview from Haitian Jack, he has alluded to Jimmy possibly being the one who made the call, which was in this article. Now, Tupac did call Jack a snitch, accused him of betrayal, but even in his diss song, he doesn't name Jack as being involved in the actual shooting. So, with him, you're left with a question, not of was he the shooter, but how much the split itself triggered what came next, and whether certain people volunteered their loyalty to his name. Now, let's go to a name that always sparks debate as well, Puff Daddy. One thing is not up for debate. Puffy was there, as you can see in this footage, and even after the shooting, he could be seen with Jimmy Henchman. So now the question becomes, in a building full of industry heavyweights, would something like this happen without somebody at least hearing whispers? We're not saying Puffy planned it, but his presence matters when you take into account his level of power at the time. Remember, Puffy in 1994 is trying to rise fast in the industry and building relationships. This is not the kind of chaos you want happening around you, especially considering Jimmy Henchman is trying to break into the industry and wouldn't want Puffy to view him as bad for business. But in the aftermath, regardless of what happened, Puffy still chose to be with Jimmy Henchman, almost showing his alliance and approval of what took place in Tupac's eyes. Which raises the uncomfortable question, if he was aware and had enough status to stop it, yet it still happened, that shows some form of being allegedly involved, and that's the real reason his name stays attached to the story. Now, right next to Puffy on the board is Andre Harrell. He had even more to lose, was a big music executive with power, real reputation, and real connections. That's why it's hard to imagine Andre being hands-on with anything dirty, but he's still in the building, still tied to the same room, still part of the same network of people Tupac believed were connected. And sometimes in these stories, involvement isn't being the shooter, but it's proximity to the suspects. Even more when it's not stopping or separating yourself from a crime you know is about to happen. And with Puff Daddy, the same can be said with Andre. He never condemned Jimmy publicly, so in Tupac's eyes, he could see that as him picking a side. But regardless, we can't confirm if Andre was part of the setup. Just saying, when the room is that powerful and something this big happens like a rap star getting shot in the same building, makes you wonder who all allowed it. Now let's address the name that gets dragged into this the most because he was in the building as well, which is the Notorious B.I.G. Biggie was in the building as seen here and didn't shy away from the publicity, choosing to walk out in front of the cameras. But when you track the details, there's no clear evidence that he knew Tupac was even coming that night. Biggie was recording on a separate floor, but there has been no claims or evidence he even knew about Lil Sean's session. According to people with him that night, they didn't even know Puffy was in the building. And Biggie's reaction after the shooting with trying to visit Tupac in the hospital reads like a friend caught in the middle. Now yes, what Biggie did after the shooting is a different conversation, and we'll get there. Before that night specifically, Biggie looks less like being involved in the setup and more like being an innocent third party. Next, let's move to the name that Tupac felt the most betrayal from, which is Big Stretch. Stretch was very close to Tupac at the time, so when rumors started floating that Stretch played a role, it wasn't just street talk. It was viewed as a full-on plot to take down Tupac. But when you step back and look at the facts, it gets complicated. In 1994, people weren't casually texting locations. You had pagers, payphones, and expensive minutes. For Stretch to be actively coordinating a robbery in real time, he'd have to be moving so suspicious that it would have had to have been obvious to those around him. So here's the bigger point. If Jimmy is already communicating directly with Tupac that night, why would he need Stretch to set anything up? Tupac kept in communication with Jimmy the whole time, even providing a set time that he should arrive. And in Tupac's songs after the shooting, he mentioned Stretch more as a friend who betrayed him, with his alliance and hanging with the people who did set him up after the fact. Example of this is Stretch was still communicating messages from Jimmy to Tupac, which Tupac seen as Stretch was too afraid to take his side, choosing to still associate with the ones that set him up. He expressed this on his song Holla At Me in his first verse, rapping, "And now you let the fear put your in a place complicated to escape. It's a fool's fate." So Stretch could have been many things that night, unloyal, confused, or caught up. But the belief Stretch was in on setting Tupac up just has too many holes in it. So we can assume for now he most likely wasn't involved. Now, we go to the street name that Tupac himself put in a song, Walter King Tut Johnson. Tut has been named for years as one of the robbers. He's been described as a known Brooklyn criminal, and his name even shows up in old reportings as someone police were looking at. There was even an article that a confidential informant claimed Tut said things like, "Pac is a sucker," and he told the informant he was the one that shot Tupac. Now, that's not a courtroom fact, and it's an informant allegation, but it does show that Tut was on investigators' radar. Then, you have the biggest cultural clue, Tupac, who named Tut on his song Against All Odds. When he rapped, "Here we come, gunshots to Tut, now you stuck." Besides just being on the cops' radar for the shooting, it was so widely assumed that even 50 Cent rapped about it years after in his song, Many Men. The feds didn't know much when Pac got shot. "I got a kite from the pen that told me Tut got knocked." So him being involved was widely speculated. One of the most important things to consider is as well is in an interview, Tupac described there was only one light-skinned robber out of the three. He was the one who stuck him up and also the one that shot him. Even more, he said he'd never forget their faces. So when Pac singles out a name and says he will never forget their faces, it tells you what he believed. It's also important to note, Tut himself has always denied involvement, but unfortunately, the question will always stay alive with the case unsolved. Now, let's move to the only person who has publicly claimed involvement, and that's Dexter Isaac. He even released a book claiming Jimmy hired him to rob Tupac specifically, paid him $2,500 and told him he could keep some of the jewelry himself. He gives deep details, some of which line up, like the type of jewelry that was taken, but he also has some contradictions, which we will get into. He claims when he arrived that night, Jimmy invited him inside into the studio to scope the scene. He claims during this he saw Biggie in Lil C's and Lil Sean's studio session. We already know Biggie didn't even know about Lil Sean's studio session that night, so him and Lil C's never went up to the studio for Dexter to see him. Another major issue is in his book, he does mention the right amount of jewelry the robbers took, which was 2 rings and about 3 bracelets. But he describes Pac having an extra chain with diamonds in each link. And we know from many photos of Tupac at this time, even from that day, Tupac never wore a second chain and always had just the one chain with the cross. Now, perhaps the biggest contradiction, Dexter repeats that Tupac shot himself, which has been a continuous rumor within hip-hop. Dexter claims no other shots were fired that night. Tupac was surprised when the doctor showed him his 5 wounds, and they were the ones to report to the media he was shot 5 times. A very important fact that also contradicts these claims is the video from a Quad Studios engineer who still works there till this day, and he shows where there was a bullet hole in the elevator wall that stayed there after the shooting.
We have Glenn Swan here, who worked with Tupac. Get out of here.
Long time ago.
Really?
Talking back in the early 90s, dude.
Wow.
And this was the elevator he was shot in, and there was a bullet hole here. You see this one?
Yep.
So if this is true, it shows separate gunshots did take place. You also have Zayd, who was with Tupac that night, and he actually did an interview about what took place. And he says Dexter doesn't match the description of the robbers and claims his story doesn't even add up. Now, we also have to remember what Tupac said. Out of the 3 robbers, the one that shot him was light-skinned. So looking at Dexter's complexion, he would have been considered the light-skinned robber. But according to Dexter's book, he stayed back to watch the door while the other 2 robbers stuck up Tupac, which is a big contradiction, especially considering some events. It was mentioned that 3 robbers approached Tupac and his crew. So Dexter's confession is real as it went viral in the past, but he has a lot of contradictions in his story, which raises the question, was he really a robber or did he get details from one of the real robbers? Keep in mind, Dexter is serving life in prison. Now, the last suspect on our board is not often talked about, which is the New York Police Department. What we do know is Tupac was under surveillance while in New York. That's not speculation, that's part of the climate around him at that time. Tupac and Zayd have both stated that there was a cop car parked right outside of Quad Studios when they stepped out in the aftermath of the robbery. So shots were fired, 3 men run out of the building, and yet no chase was given, no immediate arrests were made, and no immediate lockdown of the building as you'd expect after a music star gets shot in Midtown Manhattan. Then there's the investigation itself. Lil Sean has said he was the only one questioned for the shooting, said detectives pushed a narrative that he was jealous of Tupac, felt they wanted a simple story more than they wanted to find the truth, causing him to leave the interview completely. And after Tupac left Bellevue under an alias for safety, threats allegedly still reached him in his hospital room. And in the 90s, information didn't move that fast unless somebody had high-level access, either inside institutions or connected to people with institutional access. I'm not saying the police orchestrated the shooting. I'm saying when you look at surveillance, presence, response, and how information traveled afterward, it becomes hard to believe that they were completely unaware of the environment surrounding Tupac that unfortunately he met that night. Also, it's no coincidence that the arresting officer from his pending court case was the first one on the scene that night at Quad Studios. And sometimes, the darkest part of a mystery isn't who committed the crime, but also who knew and chose not to intervene, choosing instead to look away. In the end, this is all speculation and alleged, since the case is still unsolved. So with everything listed, we will leave it to you to decide who you think most likely played a role in the shooting. What we do know is after this event was a turning point that changed alliances, businesses, and accelerated a war, and it reshaped the trajectory of one of the most influential artists of all time. And as you know, the story doesn't end here. Next, we'll break it down what happened after the shooting, surprising details where Tupac went while healing, how the fallout with Stretch and Biggie unfolded, and how those days shaped everything that came after, which you don't want to miss out on. So make sure you like and subscribe for more, and as always, appreciate the support.